She spent months building a guest house with her own money, trusting her parents' promise. The day it was ready, they gave it to her sister. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just left. By the weekend, they were begging her to come back. She spent 2 years saving every spare dollar she could, skipped vacations, picked up extra shifts, said no to takeout so many times she started dreaming about pad thai. All of it went toward building a tiny home in her parents' backyard in northern Arizona. Not just a shed, not some camper trailer. A real livable guest house with a kitchen, a bathroom, heating, AC, the whole deal. It was her plan B. Plan A was buying a condo, but she did the math and laughed herself out of that fantasy. So when her parents suggested she build something on their property, she thought, why not? You'll always have a place here, her mom said. This is your home too, sweetheart. And she believed her. She's Rachel. She's 33. She works as a veterinary tech in Flagstaff. Not exactly a billionaire's salary, but she makes enough to live and save, barely. She's single, no kids, no wild spending habits. She just wanted a place of her own. A space where she could put up fairy lights, adopt another rescue cat, and not hear someone else's bathroom habits through paper-thin apartment walls. She poured everything into that guest house. Weekends, evenings. She met with contractors on her lunch breaks. She picked out the tiles, the fixtures, even the cabinet handles. She painted the walls herself. A dusty blue in the bedroom, a warm cream in the kitchen. She had a Pinterest board, okay? She imagined herself making coffee there in the mornings, sitting on the tiny porch with a book. It wasn't just a structure, it was a new beginning. And then it was finished. The paint had dried. The appliances were in. The electricity was hooked up. Her things were packed. She had just said goodbye to her rental and was ready to move in the next morning. That's when her dad handed her a duffel bag and said 6 words that still feel like a punch to the throat. Your sister needs it more than you. No warning. No conversation. Just that. She thought he was joking. He wasn't. She looked at her mom. Mom gave her that tired, stretched-thin smile she always uses when she knows she's done something awful but wants credit for being calm. You'll figure it out, Ratch, she said. You're young. No husband. No babies. You'll land on your feet. But Amanda, she's starting her family. She needs stability. Amanda. Of course. The golden child. Married at 25. Pregnant at 28. Now expecting baby number 2, and somehow still living rent-free while posting Instagram stories about the grind. She was standing behind them, cradling her belly like a prop. Didn't even try to look sorry. I mean, you weren't paying rent or anything, she said with a shrug. Rachel laughed. She actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so absurd she didn't know what else to do. She paid for that house. Every beam. Every pipe. Every square foot. She didn't just contribute, she built it. And now they were acting like she'd been squatting on their land and stealing air. She wanted to scream, to yell, to remind them that it was her money, her labor, her plan. But instead, she just walked away. She didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't ask for a compromise. She picked up her keys, said nothing, and drove away. She thinks that threw them more than anything. They were expecting drama, she thinks, hoping she'd fight for it, give them a chance to justify themselves. But she didn't give them that. Instead, she went silent. She moved in with a friend temporarily, got a storage unit, focused on work, cut off contact, not loudly, not dramatically. She just stopped answering. No texts, no Sunday dinners, no Happy Mother's Day flowers. She wasn't being petty. She was being done. And here's the funny part. Deep down, she knew this was coming. Not the exact moment, not those words, but the shift. She'd felt it. See, near the end of construction, her dad took over the final stages to save money. He replaced her licensed contractors with some guy from church who used to be an electrician, and his old buddy Ray, who knows plumbing stuff. You can imagine how thrilled she was. Rachel, you worry too much, Dad said. These guys are solid. Why waste money on fancy labor? She tried to argue. He ignored her. So she stepped back. Let him do it his way. After all, she thought she'd be the one living there. If something went wrong, she'd deal with it. But then it wasn't her problem anymore. 1 week later, the calls started. First her mom. Ignored. Then Amanda. Deleted without listening. Then Dad. 6 missed calls. The voicemail from Mom was, well, let's just say it made her day. Rachel, she said, her voice tight. We have a bit of a situation. The plumbing's leaking into the drywall. The electricity keeps cutting out. And there's some kind of smell, like mold, maybe worse. Amanda hasn't even been able to move in yet. We need to talk. She played it again. And then she laughed. Not because she sabotaged anything. She didn't. Not because she was happy they were struggling. She wasn't, not exactly. But because they had done this to themselves. They cut her out, told her she didn't matter. And now the house she built, the one they stole, was literally falling apart. She didn't reply. Not out of spite. Not because she wanted revenge. But because, for the first time in a long time, it wasn't her problem. It wasn't just about the guest house. It never was. It was about everything that came before it. Every quiet moment she told herself to just be grateful, to not cause waves, to be the easy daughter. All the years she spent trying to earn a seat at a table that was already set for someone else. Deep down she knew. She always knew. Her family never treated her the way they treated Amanda. But she convinced herself that if she worked hard enough, stayed helpful enough, made herself useful enough, they'd finally see her as just as important. Instead, she built a home. And the second it was finished, they handed it to her like she was nothing more than a contractor who overstayed her welcome. She turned off her phone and let the memories come. It started when they were kids. Amanda was the baby. That fact alone seemed to give her full immunity from consequences. If something went wrong, Rachel was blamed. If they fought, it was her fault. If Amanda lied, they believed her. Rachel, you're older. Mom used to say, like that erased everything. You have to set the example. Translation: Amanda gets to make mistakes. You get to clean them up. And she did. Every time. Amanda lost her phone. Rachel helped her find it. Lost her wallet. Rachel drove across town to bring it to her. She once left her passport at a gas station on the way to a school trip. And guess who skipped work to recover it? Yeah, that was Rachel. Amanda crashed Rachel's car in college. Told their parents it was Rachel's fault. Rachel wasn't even in the vehicle. They still believed Amanda. And Amanda never, not once, thanked her. Not when Rachel covered for her skipping class. Not when she bailed her out of a rent situation she caused. Not when she gave her her laptop so she wouldn't fail a semester. Nothing. Just this blank, unbothered entitlement that made Rachel's skin crawl. But the day she really saw how far it went was the summer before college. She had a part-time job at a bookstore, saving for a used car. Her parents had promised to match whatever she saved. She worked every shift she could, skipped spending, skipped outings, ate ramen like it was a food group. 2 weeks before she was set to buy the car, Amanda totaled hers. Not a fender bender. She ran a red light texting. The car was done. Rachel came home the next day to find out her parents had used her savings to buy Amanda a new one. She needs it more, sweetheart, Mom had said. You'll be at school soon, but Amanda still needs to get around. They didn't even ask. And when Rachel dared say she was upset, her dad looked at her like she'd kicked a puppy. We're a family, Rachel. You'll understand when you're older. She does understand. Just not the way he thinks. That was the first time she started pulling away. She didn't cut them off. She still held on to hope. She wanted to believe that someday they'd choose her. So when they suggested building the guest house, it felt like a breakthrough. A win. Something that was hers. And she fell for it. Her phone buzzed again, yanking her back. Another call. She finally picked up. It was her dad. Voice tight. Annoyed. Rachel, he said. What's going on with the guest house? What do you mean? You know what I mean. He lowered his voice like he thought someone might be listening. Amanda can't move in. The plumbing's leaking into the drywall. The power's out half the time. And there's this smell. She had to press her lips together to keep from laughing. Sounds like you should call a contractor. There was a pause. Look, he said, trying to sound calm. If something happened, if you forgot to finish something, you need to tell me now. She sat back. I didn't forget anything, Dad. You're the one who brought in your buddy Jim to wrap things up and save a few bucks. I told you not to. Another pause. He didn't expect her to push back. You know we don't have the money to fix this right now, he finally said. There it was. The real reason he was calling. They thought they could guilt her into coming back. Cleaning up their mess. She closed her eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. But that's not my problem. Silence. Then, Rachel, don't be like this. She didn't say anything. You can't just turn your back on your family. She gripped the phone tighter. No. You turned your back on me. I gave you everything. And I'm done. She hung up. The calls didn't stop. Mom. Dad. Amanda. Some were angry. Some pretended to be worried. A few had this fake sweet tone, like they were playing the victim. She ignored every single one. Then it changed. She started getting messages from other relatives. At first it was just cousins, then an aunt, then her Uncle Steve. Finally, her grandmother. "Rachel, honey, your mom says you left without warning and the house is falling apart. What happened?" Of course, they weren't just mad. They were embarrassed. They'd told everyone about Rachel's amazing little guest house and how Amanda was going to move in and get a fresh start. And now, it was a disaster, and they needed someone to blame. She felt the anger rise, but she didn't answer. They wanted her to blow up, to storm in and fix everything while they cried to relatives about how she'd abandoned them. But she didn't, because for once, she wasn't the one losing. And they knew it. She knew exactly what was happening. Her parents weren't just calling her anymore. They were calling everyone else, getting their version of the story out before she could say a word. It was textbook damage control. Rachel abandoned us after everything we did for her. She stormed out over nothing. She left the guest house unfinished, and now look at the mess. We supported her for years, and this is how she repays us. Didn't matter that she paid for everything. Didn't matter that she spent weekends, nights, and every spare dollar making that place livable. In their version of events, she was ungrateful, irresponsible, selfish. And the worst part, some people would believe them, because that's what always happened. Her parents had spent her entire life quietly rewriting the narrative, and they were good at it. They didn't scream. They didn't lie outright. They just nudged the story gently until they came out looking like the victims. She wasn't going to play, so she didn't respond. She didn't explain. She let the calls roll to voicemail. She let the texts stack up. She let the storm pass quietly. And then something changed. The messages from extended family stopped sounding concerned and started sounding curious, more skeptical, like they were starting to notice the cracks in the perfect story. She had a pretty good idea why. Because her parents weren't just losing control of her anymore. They were losing control of the house they stole. It started with a text from her Aunt Denise. "Rachel, honey, I heard the guest house is unlivable. That there's mold spreading? What's going on?" She stared at the message. Mold. That wasn't something they had mentioned in their voicemails. Plumbing, sure. Electrical, yes. But mold. If mold was spreading, that meant this wasn't a minor issue anymore. It was serious, potentially toxic. The second message came from her cousin Josh. "Hey, random question. Do your parents really not have the money to fix the guest house? I heard Amanda's fiancé is furious. Thought they were supposed to move in by now." Her stomach dropped. So that's what this was really about. They'd promised Amanda and her fiancé the house. And now it was falling apart faster than they could explain it away. And the best part, for the first time, Amanda wasn't on their side either. She knew Amanda would call eventually. And when she did, she didn't even try to play nice. "Rachel, what the hell is wrong with that house?" She snapped as soon as Rachel answered. Rachel almost laughed. "Why are you asking me?" she said, calm as ever. "Because," Amanda huffed, "Dad said you worked with the contractors, that you handled everything, that you made sure it was done right." "I did," Rachel cut in. "Right up until Dad decided to save a few bucks and brought in his friend to finish it off. Maybe you should ask him." Silence. Then Amanda added, more hesitantly this time. "They said it's your fault the permits aren't going through." Rachel blinked. "What permits?" Amanda groaned. "The city permits. For the plumbing, the electrical. They said you didn't file the final paperwork. And now the city won't approve occupancy." Rachel actually laughed. She couldn't help it. Because that's when it hit her. They had played themselves. They had assumed she'd be the one living there. That she'd be the one dealing with inspectors, finishing the permit process, signing off on compliance. But the second they kicked her out, they also kicked out the only person who knew how to get the job done legally. And now, they couldn't move in. Not without her help. "That's not my problem, Amanda," she said, voice calm. Amanda let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You think you're so smug, don't you?" "No," Rachel said honestly. "I just think you and Dad should have thought this through before stealing my house." "Oh my God, Rachel, stop being so dramatic," Amanda snapped. "You weren't even paying rent. That was it." "Amanda," Rachel said very slowly, "I paid for the entire house. Every board, every fixture, every bill. I didn't owe rent because I owned it." Silence. Long. Uncomfortable. Rachel could almost hear her thinking. the realization sinking in, the mental gymnastics struggling to keep up. Amanda knew Rachel was right. She also knew that if she had been the one to build something, pour her own money and time into it, only to have it ripped away by their parents and handed to Rachel, she'd have burned the whole place down. But she couldn't admit that, so she defaulted to what she always did. She lashed out. "Well, Mom and Dad are telling everyone you abandoned them," she said, voice sharp now. "That you walked away and left a disaster behind. People are talking." Rachel didn't flinch. "Let them talk." Amanda scoffed. "You're so selfish." "Goodbye, Amanda." And Rachel hung up. She stared at her phone for a minute, waiting for the familiar guilt to creep in. It didn't come. Instead, peace. Because she knew what was coming next. The more they tried to spin the story, the more people would start asking questions. And they wouldn't like the answers. Because for years, she had been the responsible one. The fixer. The quiet helper in the background, making things run. And now they were trying to make her the villain? People were going to notice the shift. And they were going to ask why. She didn't need to yell. Didn't need to send angry texts. Didn't need to defend herself. Because the truth, it has a way of slipping out through the cracks, especially when mold is involved. She didn't hear from Amanda after that call. Not for a few days, at least. But she knew that didn't mean things had calmed down. In their family, silence never meant peace. Silence meant they were scrambling. And someone, probably Amanda, was trying to find a way to fix the mess without admitting they'd made one. Good luck with that. They messed up. And she wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of being the first to call. So she waited. And just like she expected, the calls started rolling in again. Only this time, it wasn't just her parents. First, it was a random uncle she hadn't spoken to in years. Then an older cousin from Oregon she barely remembered. And then her grandmother. That's when she knew things had really escalated. Because her grandmother was the last person her parents wanted involved. She's sharp. No nonsense. Immune to guilt trips. If she was calling Rachel, it meant she'd already heard their version of the story and had questions. Rachel picked up. "Rachel, sweetheart," Grandma said. Her voice was warm but firm. "I just had a very interesting conversation with your mother." Rachel smiled to herself. "Let me guess," she said. "She told you I abandoned the family and left a trail of destruction behind me?" "Something like that," Grandma replied, dry as sandpaper. Rachel could already hear the skepticism in her tone. "But I've known you a long time, and that story didn't sound quite right." Rachel exhaled slowly. "What exactly did she say?" "That you stormed off over a misunderstanding. Left the guest house half-finished. And now poor Amanda and her fiancé have nowhere to live." Her voice tightened slightly. "Oh, and of course, she and your father are simply heartbroken that you've turned your back on the family." Rachel let out a short laugh. "Did she happen to mention that I paid for the entire house?" Pause. Then, "No, I don't believe she did." "Of course not." "So what really happened?" Grandma asked. And for the first time, Rachel told someone the full story. How her parents had encouraged her to build the guest house. How they'd called it an investment in her future. How she had poured her savings, her time, her weekends into making it real. How she had picked out every detail, from the flooring to the hardware, because it was supposed to be hers. And how, the moment it was finished, they handed it over to Amanda. Like it was always the plan. Her grandmother didn't interrupt her once. When she finished, Grandma was silent for a long, measured breath. Then she said, "That's low." "Yeah," Rachel muttered. "And let me guess," Grandma continued, her voice dry again. "They thought you'd come crawling back the minute things started falling apart?" Bingo. Another pause. Then Grandma said something Rachel didn't expect. "You should come to Sunday dinner." Rachel blinked. "What?" "Everyone's going to be there," Grandma said, a little amusement creeping into her voice. "I think it's time you let them all hear your side of the story." Rachel hesitated. It wasn't fear. She wasn't afraid of her parents anymore. But airing the truth in front of the whole family? That was a different kind of vulnerability. "Grandma, I don't know if I want to stir the pot." "I'm not saying start a fight," Grandma cut in. "I'm saying let them dig their own hole." Rachel considered it. Then she smiled. "Okay," she said. "I'll be there." She showed up 10 minutes late on purpose. The moment she walked in, the shift in the room was almost physical. People looked at her. Curious. Tense. Some glanced away. Others gave her small, knowing nods, like they already knew the truth. Amanda sat tight-lipped beside their parents. Arms crossed. Eyes down. Mom forced a smile. "Oh, Rachel, you actually came." "Yeah," she said, taking a seat. She didn't add surprised, but the implication was loud. Dinner started awkwardly. Small talk. Too much silverware clinking. Tension so thick you could have buttered bread with it. And then, just as they were finishing up, her grandmother set down her glass, folded her hands, and said, "So, Amanda, how's the new house coming along?" Silence. Amanda's jaw clenched. Her dad jumped in, still dealing with a few small issues. "Oh," Grandma raised an eyebrow. "What kind of issues?" Amanda shot him a warning look, but he cleared his throat. "Nothing major. Just some plumbing and electrical stuff. Minor setbacks." "Minor setbacks?" Rachel almost choked on her drink. Grandma turned to her. "Rachel, dear, didn't you handle the construction on that house?" Every head turned. Rachel took a slow sip before answering. "I did. Right up until Dad decided to bring in a cheaper option behind my back. I told him it was a bad idea, but hey, what do I know?" The silence that followed was so dense it could have shattered glass. Amanda's face went crimson. Mom's smile twitched like a glitching robot. Dad looked ready to self-combust. But they couldn't argue. Not without outing themselves. And the room? It turned. Her aunt leaned over to whisper to her daughter. Her uncle muttered, "Unbelievable." Her cousin raised his eyebrows like everything had just clicked into place. That was it. That was the moment her parents lost control of the narrative. Because now it wasn't just Rachel saying it. It wasn't just a voicemail or a text. It was them, sitting there silent while the truth stood in the middle of the room like a neon sign. She didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't throw plates or demand apologies. She just let it sit there. And that was enough. They didn't call her after that. Neither did Amanda. She didn't expect them to. They were too busy scrambling, trying to salvage what was left of their version of the story. But it was too late. The cracks were visible now. And Rachel? She left that dinner feeling lighter than she had in months. Not because she won, but because for the first time, she didn't feel like she'd lost. Epilogue. She never got an apology. Not that she expected one. Her family doesn't do apologies. They do silence. They do let's just move on like nothing happened. But she didn't need an apology. Because the guest house? It may be sitting there full of mold and bad decisions, but it taught her something they never did. That her worth was never measured by how much she could fix. She's done being the responsible one. Done cleaning up other people's messes. And done pretending that loyalty means letting yourself be walked on. They built the lie. She just stopped holding the foundation. If this story hit a little too close to home, she's not alone. Let her know what you would have done in her place down in the comments. Speech balloon she reads every one. And hey, if you like the story, hit the like button, subscribe. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you can do.